India's Citizenship Amendment Act, which eases the path for non-Muslims from neighbouring Muslim-majority nations to gain citizenship, has triggered weeks of sometimes violent protests against Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government.
जब महात्मा ने फाड़ा, मैं इस बिल को फाड़ता हूं, ये हिंदुस्तान को तोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहा है। ये बिल कहीं पर भी 0.00 जब संविधान का प्रियम्बल लिखा जा रहा था तो उसको भगवान खुदा के नाम से ही लिखा गया। अब वो ऊंचाई और ये पस्ती देखिए आप कि एक कानून ऐसा बनाया जा रहा है जो मजहब की बुनियाद पर बनाया जा रहा है। मुझे गम इस बात का है कि इस हुकूमत को जिसने संविधान पर ओथ लिया, आज इस्लाम से, मुसलमानों से इतनी नफरत क्यों? आखिर क्या है? आखिर इस नफरत का, इस डिस्क्रिमिनेशन की वजह क्या है आप में? ये कानून जो बनाया जा रहा है इसलिए बनाया जा रहा है कि दोबारा पार्टीशन हो। ये कानून तो हिटलर के उस कानून से ही बदतर है, उस कानून से ही बदतर है। कहां लाकर छोड़ दिए भारत को आप? आपकी वजह से पॉलिटिकल मार्जिनाइजेशन हो गया मुसलमानों का। आप तो उनको दबा रहे हैं। ये हिंदुस्तान के संविधान के खिलाफ है और ये उन लोगों की तौहीन है जिन्होंने इस मुल्क को आजाद करवाया तो सन 57 की जंग आजादी हो। महात्मा गांधी कैसे महात्मा बने मालूम मैडम? उन्होंने साउथ अफ्रीका के नेशनल रजिस्टर कार्ड को फाड़ दिया था, जला दिया था। इसीलिए जब महात्मा ने फाड़ा, मैं इस बिल को फाड़ता हूं, ये हिंदुस्तान को तोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहा है।
The law is seen by opponents as discriminating against Muslims and has deepened legitimate concerns that Modi's administration is undermining India's secular traditions, opposing religious freedoms and intolerance towards the minorities, encouraging extremist views from far right-wing groups, advocating ethnic and cultural cleansing. India has sanctioned a media blackout where internet and telephony services have been barred to prevent any information from being leaked out. The Modi administration is purposely forming an insecure atmosphere of increased animosity towards the Muslims through violent and spiteful rhetoric being displayed at BJP-led rallies and describing classes from to inclusive of the citizenship program in direct violation of the constitution. The BJP leaders are trying to give the protests a Hindu-Muslim colour. They incite the people in the name of religion, which is very unfortunate. They make it into a Hindu-Muslim issue, spreading lies, propaganda, intimidation and pillage and destroy religious sites, vandalize businesses and homes and attack the innocents. Mender said before adding, "It is clear that the BJP will create hatred and incite violence in order to crush the anti-CAA movements."
I am standing right now in Ashok Nagar, Gully number 5 as it is known. This behind me is the mosque called Badi Masjid in Gully number 5 in Ashok Nagar, which is confirmed contrary to some news reports that were coming in saying that this is an old image, this is an old video, but as you can see, this flag, the flag of India, and on top of that you can see a flag saying Jai Shri Ram, were hoisted yesterday by people whom locals say did not belong to this locality and had come from outside. So it is confirmed now, and we can confirm that this masjid called Badi Masjid was vandalized yesterday, and the mosque was set on fire. It was gutted. The inside of the mosque is completely gutted. There are 8 shops located with the mosque. These are shoes and slipper shops, leather, rubber shoes, which were also completely gutted. And very importantly, there are 4 houses behind the mosque. Adjacent to the mosque, there are 4 homes belonging to 4 Muslim families, where about 30 to 35 members, including children as young, and I would like to emphasize this, as young as 6 months, were staying. Each of those 4 homes were barged into, vandalized, set on fire, and they were looted. They even took away gas cylinders. They even took away appliances, utensils, sparing nothing.
The violence has taken on religious overtones, with Hindu and Muslim groups fighting each other. The clashes have come during US President Donald Trump's first official visit to the country. The violence is centered on Muslim-majority neighborhoods in northeast Delhi, about 18 kilometers from the heart of the capital, where Donald Trump has been holding meetings with the Indian leaders, diplomats and businessmen. The Citizenship Amendment Act, the CAA, which critics say is anti-Muslim, has sparked massive protests since it was passed last year, and some of those have turned violent due to racism and fascism being a fundamental part of institutionalization and nationalization of Indian politics. The BJP government is implementing its 2019 election promises it made to its voters to implement a nationwide National Register of Citizens, the NRC, which sought to identify infiltrators, often a euphemism for Muslims, and have them kicked out of the country. A similar state-level NRC exercise conducted in the northeastern state of Assam had resulted disastrously in getting more than 2 million residents identified as illegal, a large majority of whom turned out to be Hindus. Critics argued that the Citizenship Amendment Act was brought about to deal with the kind of eventuality proposed from the nationwide NRC exercise. The CAA will allow all those caught in the NRC exercise as illegals to be eventually absorbed as citizens, leaving only the Muslims out, who allegedly are the real target of the proposed NRC exercise.
બાવીસ વર્ષ પહેલા આવું જ થતું હતું અને આવું થઈ શકે છે જો એ લોકો આવશે તો.
પણ ડોન્ટ વરી, કોઈ નહીં આવે, કેમ કે અહીં મોદી છે.
The passaging of the controversial CAA followed the abrogation of Article 370 in the Muslim state of Kashmir, stripping off its promised autonomy and bringing it directly under the Indian authority, solidifying its brutal 70-year military occupation of the region. It also came after the handing over of the Babri Masjid site to Hindus by the Supreme Court, which had been trying the case for decades. The CAA was passed in the Indian Parliament by an overwhelming majority, proposed to grant citizenship to non-Muslims from Muslim-majority countries, i.e. Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan, under the garb of giving refuge to victims of religious persecution, and it's seen widely by Muslims as a precursor to be implemented in conjunction with NRC. the eventual result of which is feared to convert a large number of Muslims into illegal citizens. Islam is the second largest religion in India with 14.2% of the country's population, or around 200 million Muslims, making India the country with the largest Muslim population outside Muslim majority countries since its independence in 1947 from the British colonial Raj, leading to its partition into two countries, Hindu-dominated India and Muslim-dominated Pakistan. The reality of Muslims in India has been characterized by large-scale discrimination, social-political marginalization, and often state-sponsored violence, irrespective of the party in power. The destruction of the 15th century mosque, the Babri Masjid, on the 6th of December 1992 by violent Hindu mobs was marked as a watershed event in the tumultuous history of Muslim persecution in secular India.
This is how midday prayers at one of India's largest mosques ended on Friday. Thousands of people of all religions gathered outside the Jama Masjid in the capital New Delhi in the face of a bolstered police presence. It's one of at least 15 deadly protests that have taken place across the country despite a ban on public gatherings. They erupted earlier this month after the Indian Parliament passed the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act.
This protest is against Modi and Amit Shah. This bill goes against Islamic law and we are against the Citizenship Amendment Act they have passed. India's population, whether they be Hindu, Muslim, Sikh or Christian, everyone is rejecting this law.
They have foregone the issue of employment and are using divisive policies based on religion. This must be stopped. We are against it.
The new law makes it easier for those belonging to some minority religions from Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan who arrived in India before 2015 to become citizens. It does not apply to Muslims. The protests began at a few universities, including Delhi's Jamia Millia Islamia University. It led to days of clashes that resulted in hundreds of injuries. Since then, the internet has been shut down in some areas and hundreds of people have been arrested. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi says the law will ease the path for persecuted minorities from neighbouring countries to gain Indian citizenship. And while some small crowds marched in support of the law, opposition leaders backed those who oppose it.
In a democracy, people have a right to raise their voice against wrong decisions and policies of the government and register their concerns. The BJP government has shown utter disregard for people's voices and chosen to use brute force to suppress dissent.
As protests continued into Friday evening, police used water cannon to disperse crowds, but many are undeterred. They say they'll fight to protect India's secular ideals. Shamim Chowdhury, TRT World.
How have the Muslims in India responded? The passing of the Citizenship Amendment Act was met with fierce protests by Muslims all across India who clearly saw through the anti-Muslim agenda of the legislation being an existential threat. The bill has also led to alarm bells ringing among a large section of the liberal academics and the common masses, where it has been seen as a law which violates the secular ethoses of the Indian constitution. Ironically, it's the same masses which had overwhelmingly voted the BJP into power based on its election manifesto, which included the promise to implement the National Register of Citizens. The protests were kicked off by the students of Jamia Millia Islamia, a reputed Central University in the heart of the capital, on 15th of December 2019. This was met with a brutal response from the local police, where they barged into the campus, turning it into a battleground. The police lobbed tear gas shells inside the university campus, forced their way in and assaulted students, allegedly thrashing them even inside the library and canteen. The heavy-handed response of the government to the peaceful exercise of the democratic rights by the students sparked off a nationwide protest reaction from students of prominent universities across India. Muslims have organised protests and demonstrations as well as marches across the country, and even united in their denunciation of the law and the demand to abrogate it. The protests have been seen large-scale participation of Muslims who have been shocked into action after a series of developments, lynchings, riots and persecutions in the last few years that has increased their sense of insecurity, resentment and alienation from mainstream political parties, to an extent from the state itself because of its policies reflecting Hindutva beliefs identical to the Nazis and the Zionists.
It took police several hours to regain control after a second day of unrest, some of the most violent protests for weeks in the capital against the Citizen Amendment law. The fighting was in the districts of Jafrabad and Bajambura in northeast Delhi between Hindu groups who support the law and Muslim communities. They say the legislation is racist and discriminates against India's Muslim minority.
We were all sitting here peacefully protesting near the Jafrabad school, and there was no provocation from our side. All the violence that happened took place from their side. The mob came and threw stones at the mosque. They've been making provocative slogans and speeches like "shoot the traitor."
We have figured out that all this violence was pre-planned. They've actually called people to assemble, and there was a plan in place when they attacked us. It also seemed that the local police were on their side. Everyone had a weapon, some even carried a gun. They were the ones who threw the first stones.
As the trouble escalated, a number of people were seriously injured and investigations into the deaths have begun.
It's not clear yet who was responsible for the death of the policeman, but it underlines just how volatile the situation remains here, and it shows the deepening anger that still exists on both sides of this sensitive issue.
This video seems to show Hindu protesters throwing stones while a policeman does little to stop them. These scenes show others setting fire to Muslim property. The video cannot be independently verified. The violence followed threats by Hindu leaders to remove a group of Muslim women whose sit-down protest has forced the closure of a major road. A mosque in Jafrabad was attacked and cars and homes were set on fire. In efforts to maintain calm, police have imposed emergency measures banning gatherings of more than 4 people, but we saw little being done to enforce the measures.
The relationship between the Hindu and Muslim communities has become bad, and this tension has now spread in other places surrounding this locality and also further afield outside Delhi.
As more security forces were drafted in to guard areas overnight, the flames still burned and local people are fearful of further violence to come.
And we're looking at pictures from moments ago of the official welcoming ceremony shaping up to receive the US president shortly. That ceremony will include a symbolic laying of a wreath at Gandhi's memorial before the two leaders move on for direct talks at Hyderabad House. Let's bring in Tony Bertley. He's live for us in New Delhi. How much of a shadow is the violence casting over this visit by the US president?
I don't think much of a shadow at all. I think probably Donald Trump is not aware of what's going on. He would have had to turn on his TV last night to see those scenes of violence, those terrible clashes. But otherwise, it's business as usual. You could see from yesterday, it's been described as a love-in between the two leaders. They were pampering each other's egos. And Donald Trump is a man, as we know, who respects strength. Mr. Modi is a strong leader. Mr. Trump respects that. He respects Erdogan of Turkey, he respects Putin of Russia. And also, you know, Trump's stand on Muslim issues back in the United States is making it unlikely that he's going to be highly critical of Mr. Modi and this CAA Act, which is causing all the problems at the moment on the streets in various parts of India. We are told by White House officials that he will raise these matters in private today in those talks with Mr. Modi, but he's not likely to be critical. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, he sees the world in a very simple way. I think black and white, good and bad, enemies and friends. And I think very much he sees Mr. Modi and India as a friend, and a very important one, as a buffer to China in this part of the world. So I don't think he's going to be critical at all of what's going on. He hasn't mentioned Kashmir, he hasn't mentioned the street protests, but he has mentioned about secular rights and the rights of minorities. But that is what you would expect to hear from him.
All right, Tony Bertley there. Thanks so much for that.
How has the Indian government responded? The government has been taken by surprise to the resistance from Muslims, who they have largely been seen until now as apathetic and having been feared into submission, and the inevitable acceptance of undeclared second or third class citizenship status. Predictably, it has tried to rope in official ulama to issue statements towing the government line. The result has been largely ineffective, where Muslims have largely condemned these ulama and have refused to heed their advice. On 22nd December 2019, Modi was forced into dedicating an election rally in Delhi to a speech which consisted of outright falsehoods and half-truths. He insisted that his government has never even discussed the National Register of Citizens, contrary to the speeches the Home Minister has been making, clearly laying out the plans of the government, and has even gone on record to make a statement in the Parliament.